So I've been running a development agency, a software development company, for the past 2.5 years or so, and it's brought me a really awesome quality of life. We do, in six figures, but I obviously want to move that towards seven figures and beyond, and pushing towards scaling that, and like, I've made more money than I to be honest, I probably imagined that I would at this age, ever imagined, and there's probably been one single lesson that has been the biggest thing for me, and that has been that of focus. And for me, I started this company when I was 17, and I'm 20 at the minute. But since I was 13, I had always been dabbling in startups and trying to build stuff. And the reality is, I didn't actually make, like, in all of that time from 13 to 17, I made I think like $2,500 or so, like cumulatively maybe 3K. Like it was like 4 years making 3 grand is really not much. And it came from like a couple freelancing gigs. Like there was nothing substantial there. There was one business which I actually did, which was profitable, which was my first one. That's what kind of like got me into that. But even that, like the profit that it made, it was very, very little. I mean, it was also in a much weaker currency, so that was a big reason why it was like kind of less. But that was like the first time I made like significant progress toward my goals and like shaping a quality of life that I want and enjoy and things like that was when I actually just focused on one singular thing. And I wasn't trying to do several businesses at a time. I wasn't trying to do that. And even within that business, the most progress that I ever started to make was when I focused on the singular right thing. And I think honestly that's a lesson that I took way too long to learn, but I might as well share it. And it's something that I try and remind myself of constantly. And it is that of focus, that of doing the singular correct thing that matters, because it's like 80-20. Usually there's one constraint, and if you solve that, if everything else is imperfect, but that one thing is unblocked, you still unblock a lot of growth. One of the big ways that I realized this was, firstly, like I made a lot of mistakes in the first year and a half of running my business. I really didn't know what I was doing. I knew how to develop software, and I thought, okay, I know how to make software. By extension, I can run a software company. That seems like a logical assumption to make. And I could not have been more wrong. I didn't realize that the software development skill set and the business skill set have nothing to do with each other. And the thing itself that you are selling and the business skill set are entirely separate, at least for most businesses. And that was a lesson that took me far too long to learn. I thought I knew much more than I did for a very long time in business, and then I realized, oh, I'm actually really stupid, and I still am, and I'm learning a lot of stuff. But like, it was really challenging to identify this at the time. But even within that business, so I started that, and I chose that business to focus on for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that I committed to myself was I didn't want to flip flop around, because from 13 to 17, I was always trying something new. I tried drop shipping, day trading, trying a tech company, tried to do a little bit of freelance, but that wasn't really, I didn't want to go full time into that. Like I tried a lot of different stuff, and like I had also been I dabbled in like research and more academic stuff. Like I'm a pretty kind of you'd consider nerdy person. I love kind of science and STEM and all that kind of stuff. And through all of that, I was always switching, and I was always thinking about the next thing, and I always was juggling a lot of projects and things. And so when I did this one, I was like, I want to commit to this. And I did it at 17, at the tail end of high school. And when I left high school, I was actually taking a kind of gap year. I wasn't really intending to not go to university, but over time, I kind of settled on that decision. And then I solidified that, and I just went all in on this one thing. And that was the biggest thing that made the most progress for me. And even then, in the business, in that first year and a half, I failed a fuck ton. And the biggest growth spurt, and I'm talking like I 3x the business in 6 months-ish, was when I focused on the constraint, which was just making a better quality service, like really doubling down on that and making something that I was prouder of. When I started, I made a lot of mistakes. I tried to contract people too early, and I didn't know how to vet people. I've tried to make other videos to help other people avoid that mistake. But basically, the quality of my service was poor, not because I did bad work, but I hired people who did awful work, and I didn't review things consistently. And that tends to be, that tended to be one of the issues. And so now I really doubled down. And when I focused on that, things started to snap into place. Now, that didn't totally kind of like skyrocket the company for a variety of reasons, but that was one of the biggest constraints. And so it unblocked a lot of things. And one of the things which I realized is like unblocking the major constraint will create a lot of growth, even if a lot of the other things that you've done are not perfect. And I realized this actually somewhat recently. I think just yesterday, I recorded a video about how I've spent something like 20K in online coaching things of various sorts. And the most expensive of those programs was a program that cost me $7,500. And, it's this guy who's selling, some pretty high ticket stuff. It's like this 3-month thing, $7,500. And the back end fulfillment is awful. It's really not that good. It's like there's zero follow up. There's like some good content, but that's it. Like, is it worth 7.5? Absolutely not. And so you could argue like the quality of the service is really not there. But the thing is, like, his business still went way bigger than mine in far less time, just because he unlocked the right constraint first. He just focused on lead generation. And that's the only thing he knows how to do. The fulfillment is terrible. And so I wouldn't recommend anybody to do the thing, and I would recommend against it. But the fact that he solved the right constraint first and unblocked a bunch of growth kind of like pushed him faster in a particular like context, right? Now, at the same time, he'll have a really hard time growing that in the long term because the actual fulfillment is just terrible. And so over time, word of mouth will come around that it's just not worth it. And so like, then you just like, to have consistent growth, you need to unblock all the constraints, right? One by one. But that was one of the first examples where I really looked at that and I was like, that's just an example of you solving the right constraint unlocks a bunch of business. It unlocks a lot of growth, even if the other components may not be perfect. You don't need to be perfect at everything. You just need to solve the right constraint at the right time. And I would say, like in his position, he's probably got that lead generation done really well. Now, if he doubled down on the back end, on the actual fulfillment, he could probably like get way more out of his customers and like build a way bigger business. But, he hasn't done that. And like that singular biggest lesson would have been, it was always being focused. And I wish I had learned that sooner. If I had learned that sooner, I think I would have gotten a lot further. And I think it's particularly hard as a young person because focus means looking at something in terms of months and years, not weeks and days. And as a young person that lives in kind of TikTok era, Instagram era, all that kind of stuff, everything is so instant. Everything is so fast that it is really hard. And you think in high school years, you go up to what, grade 12, year 13, your entire life is cut up into semesters of a couple months and you have exams at the end of the year and like things are very fast. Like something is due next week or in a couple of weeks. It's not in months and years of the same thing. And when you're used to thinking of things like that, it's very, very hard to digest the idea that you might be committing 3 to 5 years of your life to something in starting a business. And that's how long it takes to really build something. And that idea is something that I think I was very reluctant to accept for a long time, which is why I spent 4 years like an idiot, like just bouncing around. For context, when I was 13, the thing that I had built, the first business I had built that had made me money was actually a delivery website. And I'm talking dead simple. My friends at school ordered food and it went to a Google form. And then I used Google Sheets as my backend because I didn't know how to build a backend. And that was literally my first business, my MVP. Actually, I think I made a video about like how much my old coding side projects made. And that was the first one. If I, like at the time I was living in Malaysia, Uber Eats, Grab Food, like these delivery providers didn't exist. And so that's why the business model worked because there was no other option for the kids at my school. And a lot of them were kind of boarding kids. I went home every day, but others didn't. So they wanted outside food. And I had a business there. And if it wasn't like, sometimes I play that scenario back in my head. And if I just think that I had kept like focusing on that and just growing that and just doing more and more delivery, figuring out how to get other people to do delivery instead of me, because I was, delivering everything myself. I mean, I'm 13 at this point. Like, I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just programming for fun. and trying to make a little bit of cash. Like if I had just kept doing that, I would have at the very least built a little competitor to the local Uber Eats in my area, and they would have probably wanted to buy me out at some point. Like that itself was a business, and it had product market fit, and I did something there. And there was a lot of nuance there and other reasons why it might not have worked, but like I had found something that worked. All I needed was focus, and that was a component that I didn't have because I thought that you grew things like that instantly. When I started this development agency, I remember a particular conversation with my friend where I explained to him how easily I'd get to 100,000 a month because most service businesses cap out at about $1 million. It's probably pretty easy. So by the end of the first year, maybe 100K a month. In happy days, I could not have been more wrong. It took me it was a very painful reality check a year into honestly having almost bankrupted the company 2 times. That it really sucked, and it was a real slap to my face of you have no idea what you're actually doing, and this is harder than it looks, and it takes longer than it seems initially, and you have to play with that in mind. And if in order to play with that in mind, you have to be willing to accept the idea of focus, because you cannot play with something long term and be doing a million things at once, because you just none of those things are going to actually progress. The singular idea of focus was the biggest business lesson, and I wish I had learned it sooner. But in my impatience to get to where I wanted, I actually ended up making myself take longer. In the wanting everything now, tomorrow, next week, that was always the mentality that honestly, that was what held me back for the longest time. If I had just started this agency and just done that one thing since I was 13 until now, I'd be so much further ahead. But that wasn't the case. And that was my biggest mistake. And I think the only way you can beat people and kind of progress faster is by focusing harder and by doing fewer things and excluding fewer things. If I had no social life, didn't go to the gym, ate the bare minimum, didn't go outside, if I exclude more things and I had more focus on the singular agency that I'm building, I would move faster. The only thing that will get you to move faster is focus. That is literally the only thing that will increase your speed is not doing more things. It's actually the opposite. It's doing less things. And that was a huge fallacy that I used to believe. When I was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I was thinking I'm going to do lots of things and that's going to make me move faster because I'm doing more and I'm creating more and just more is going to happen. When the reality is it's actually doing fewer things and just focusing on the one true thing that's actually going to get you there. And a lot of things can get you there. There's no one way of playing the game. There's a million businesses that do things a different way. There's millions of restaurants and they all run things in a different way. Some better, some worse, whatever. But I think that was also a big fallacy that held me back, was that I was trying to find the perfect vehicle, the perfect this, the perfect that. I think there's just perfect for your situation. I actually think the thing that you should do a business in is not about passion or about what you're good at. It's about what you have distribution in. Because distribution is the hardest thing to start off with because if you have distribution into something, so basically if you have a way to get leads, then you have tries, you have attempts to get better at something. And that was the thing that I didn't realize. And that begs the question, what do you do if you have absolute zero to begin with? Then I would say, look at what you're good at, what you like doing, whatever. But that's a bit of a tangent, but I think the singular biggest thing is just focusing on one thing. It is excluding more things will make you go faster. If you even from a life perspective, if you just exclude more things, you will build a business faster. There are times when you do need to test, and there's a really good book by, who is it? David Epstein? David Epstein, I think. I hope that's not the guy who's convicted. It's called Range. The book is called Range, and you can find it if you Google it. But Range does a really good job of highlighting how generalists have a lot of value and whatever. But one of the ideas from the book that really stuck with me is like you have sampling phases and you have focus phases. And in sampling, you basically sample a lot of different things, and that teaches you a lot. You learn a lot. And 13 to 17, I was sampling, and I like by no means do I regret it, because I also think I learned a lot, and I gained a lot of like experience and context, and in turn, I think that made me a wiser person for it. But the opposite side of that coin is like when you pick something and then you focus on it, and that's how you move really fast. I think there also is a time for sampling it and having to like try to do multiple things, but you have to be very, very careful about how you use your time to sample things, because you are obviously sacrificing time that you could be focusing, and that's the time where you kind of like speed up, right? Actually, if you think about it like a car. If you have to keep turning, you're going to go way slower. Whereas if you have a car where the engine just goes faster and faster, if you just go in a straight line, you can accelerate like really, really fast. If you just keep going straight and you never change direction, your car will slowly like go faster and whatever. But like that is how you go faster than other people. It's just not changing direction. Whereas if you kind of swerve in and out, or if you make U-turns, that's how you make zero fucking progress in anything. And I like, if I can save somebody that pain, I think that's worthwhile. And I find myself having to remind myself of that lesson pretty often, because it's like it doesn't come to me naturally. A lot of the time I have a tendency to want to do different things, and I want to do this and do that. But yeah, even now, like with like the video that you're watching right now, the content that I'm creating, this is the only thing that I have committed to doing on a daily basis. Like this is the singular thing, and I will commit to doing nothing else, because I know these videos are the most important thing, and like not the most important thing, but I chose that I chose to do them every single day, and I know that when I choose to do something every single day, if I want to stick with that and if I want to be consistent, I'm not going to add anything else to that daily to-do list, because I need to make it as easy as possible to hit that daily thing. And so I just create more focus. And by creating more focus, I've made myself more consistent. Like I've made it really easy to be consistent by focusing. And I have nothing else. I'm not trying to post on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, despite thinking all of these platforms are good to post on. And actually, if anything, like I'll hire people to help me out with content on these things. I'll hire people to help me distribute content. For example, my editor makes shorts out of these videos. And that's a good example. But I will literally I will refuse to commit to doing anything else on a daily basis, because that will detract from my focus of this daily habit. And I've made a point that I want to make it a daily habit. And I know those are very, very hard to maintain over the long term. And so focus is the way that I kind of make sure that I don't fail. And yeah, that's what I'm very unwilling to break on that. And when I have just focused on something is when I've made the most amount of progress. And if you want to move faster, you just focus more. That is how intensity works. Intensity is focus. Actually, you can think about it like the sun as well. If you've ever seen somebody burn a piece of paper with a magnifying glass, right? Like the sun shines and the magnifying glass kind of concentrates the light into one spot, and it can melt a rock. That is the power of focus. That is basically you take a bunch of dispersed energy and you concentrate it in one really, really small place, and it burns rock. It can melt metal. It will it just makes stuff happen. It's really incredible. But you have to be able to kind of collect all that dispersed energy and focus it on one place, which is not necessarily something that comes easy to us as humans by default. Yeah. Anyway, that's I think a rant that I've been having with myself today. One of the things that's on my mind is trying to figure out social content for the company, because we really don't do much of that. And I know that needs to be my singular focus for company work right now. It's not like client work and stuff like that. The constraint is social. The constraint is leads. The constraint is that kind of stuff. And I've been procrastinating it for a really long time because it feels daunting and very unknown. And that's one of my bigger points of failures. And so, yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about that today. And doubling down on that singular point of focus, and actually pushing forward with that every single day, with just that one thing. That is the one priority I have with the company at the minute. So, yeah. Anyway, if I can save somebody the trouble, I think that's worthwhile. So yeah, but I'm gonna get back to work, finish some stuff up, and then I'm gonna head out so I don't completely fry my brain.